Hello and welcome to another episode of Dingers and Stingers, the only podcast that has Dallas come up with the only podcast sayings at the front. He's still out of the country, so he was not with us today. He'll be back next week, most likely.
Just a little camera
You know,
shy.
there's no guarantees with airplanes these days, but we we expect him back.
You're gonna feel
Next
so
week.
bad if something happens to Dallas.
And no, I covered my bases. You know, I can't guarantee anything.
I
So
guess that's fair.
fingers crossed for Dallas. Anyway, yeah, we're back. Matt and Drew back on the show. Today we're going to go over the National League Western Division. It's a doozy. So because of that, we probably aren't going to delve into any football talk unless like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson signs while we're recording or something. We'll probably bring that up, but otherwise we're going to stick to baseball this week because there is a lot to talk about in this division. It is home of the reigning champs. It's home to Matt's favorite team, the San Diego Padres. And there's a few other exciting things going on in this division as well. And of course, we'll end the episode with our dinger of the week and our stinger of the week. But Matt, how you doing?
Doing all right. Life's kind of crazy right now. I'm about to finish up my master's, as we said last week. I mean, every week we're getting another week closer to becoming a father. So it's kind of something to wrap my head around still. But all in all, things are going good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I have like I don't know if it's a cold or if it's just that, the everything's starting to bloom and my allergies are off their rocker a little bit, but
Yeah.
you might hear it in my voice, a little stuffy, but we're gonna power through. And I'm a substitute teacher. My wife's a regular full-time teacher, and our spring break starts tomorrow. Like tomorrow's the last day, then we get a week off. So looking forward to that. But
Nice.
yeah, and then baseball season's right around the corner. We have this
It's here.
episode. We have
Baseball
one
season's
episode.
already begun.
Well, yes, and we'll talk about that for a minute. But yeah, we have one more division to do next week, just in time, and then we're in the swing of things, and we'll see where our content goes from there.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your National League West. Probably the most high-profile division in baseball these days. You've got the Dodgers. Obviously, they just won the World Series. If you've been living under a rock, I'll let you know they won the World Series with a team that it was obviously good. It won the World Series, but like it was not a full strength team. Their pitching staff was pretty beat up in the playoffs. They, had to shuffle some pieces around, and they still got it done. And then since we saw them last, they went out and they added, and then they added some more, and then they kept a guy or two, and then they added more. So the Dodgers this offseason, they signed Blake Snell, they signed Roki Sasaki, which we've talked about on this show. They signed Tanner Scott. Those are both starting pitchers. Tanner
Mhm.
Scott, Kirby Yates for the bullpen, two of the best relievers in baseball last year. They signed Michael Conforto, who's kind of an under the radar, but probably going to be an excellent player for them, outfielder. They signed Song Kim from the KBO. They kept in a re-signing. They kept Teoscar Hernandez, their slugger, outfielder. Blake Trinan, reliever, and super utility man Kike Hernandez, who, you know, he's just always going to find his way back to the Dodgers. It seems the only people they lost were they traded away Gavin Lux. They lost Walker Bueller and Jack Flaherty to free agency, and that's basically it. So we have talked a lot about the Dodgers on the show in past episodes, but in terms of just the 2025 season, Matt, what do you got for the Dodgers?
I mean, as a Padres fan, as a biased person, I don't want to see it happen, but this is the World Series favorite. I mean, talk about the most mild take of all time. The Dodgers are going to be the World Series favorite this year, barring some catastrophe. And
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if you stayed up and watched the games or if you just like watched the highlights or whatnot, but like their little mini series against Chicago, like they didn't even look that good and they just still were winning. Like to me, it felt like they weren't even playing that well. Roki Sasaki, I mean, he barely made it through like what 4 innings, 5 innings, and he had
Yeah,
like
didn't throw a ton of
just
strikes.
yeah, he was just walking people all over the place, and yet he only somehow gives up one, and they end up scoring six in that game. I think it was like it feels like they're just showing like if this team is healthy, there's kind of just like an inevitability about them
Hmm.
that you kind of can't make a single mistake. You gotta beat them to beat them. And
Yeah,
I mean, this is a team I wouldn't be shocked if healthy. I wouldn't be shocked if this team was going to make a legitimate competitive push for the season win record. Like they're so good, and they're playing that without Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. Like
hmm, yeah,
two of their best players, the number two and number three hitters for them were out, and yet it still felt that way. So
yeah,
it's just I don't know, man. It's you got to beat them.
yeah.
You
You
just
know,
got to beat
it's truly an embarrassment of riches they have over there, unlike anything we've seen in our lifetime. The Yankees had a juggernaut when we were very, very young. Um, but I don't know if it felt the same way in terms of them signing every player. Like, I don't know. But I will say, yeah, this is something that's new to us. They won a World Series in a year, like I mentioned at the top, like they there was other teams that could have won last year. Like it really seemed like that. And then they just got so much better. They're probably the most improved team in baseball, and they won the World Series. So that's like that in itself is craziness. I want to talk particularly about the pitching staff because that was kind of, if you have to pick an Achilles heel for a team that wins the World Series, that was it last year. Their starting pitching really all fell apart injury wise last year. So they were kind of running the playoffs with three starters and then like patchwork. And those
them.
three starters were Yamamoto, who's good and supposed to be good. And then it was Jack Flaherty and Walker Bueller. And Flaherty and Bueller are gone, but they also, you know, were not the most talented guys on their roster, you would say. Uh, they have Tyler Glasnow, who was great for them last year, made his first All Star team, and then was hurt down the stretch. But expect big things from him. They got Blake Snell, two-time Cy Young winner, had a great year with the Giants last year, signed a big contract with the Dodgers, and of course Roki Sasaki. Um, Shohei, I don't know if you've heard of him, Shohei Ohtani. Last year's National League MVP at just playing DH is supposed to come back and pitch, be a starting pitcher for them at some point this season. Uh, it's just it's just absolutely insane. I mean, because they're preparing themselves for the same thing that happened, which is a bunch of pitchers get hurt. They've got the backfill now to replace those arms. Now they already had lost Gavin Stone for the year. Not that he was sketched into their starting rotation, but like the injuries do happen. But it just you take the top 10 guys, and I think all of them could start on another team. Like I'm not saying they'd be the number one on another team, but like all of them could potentially be in a someone else's starting rotation. So that's
Absolutely.
pretty crazy. The bullpen, Tanner Scott, you know him from the Padres, like
Mhm.
just a great hard throwing lefty, a lot of swing and miss. Kirby Yates is getting up there, but he had an amazing year with the Rangers last year. Uh, I don't
Is
know, man.
Kirby
I
Yates the
think
dude who's been on like all the World Series teams? Like he's always in the World
no, no,
Series?
that's Will Smith.
Uh,
Yeah,
I was like, I know there's
yeah.
like an old dude who's just on World Series teams.
Kirby Yates was also a Padre once upon a time, but that might have been
Back in the
before
day.
your days. Yeah.
That was back
Um,
in the day.
yeah. So I mean, the pitching is going to be great. There's no doubt about it. And then their offense, you've got Shohei at the top, followed by when healthy, Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. So that's three guys who have won MVPs uh, at the top of the lineup. After that, it's good, but it's not outstanding. So if you're going to point out one little weakness with the Dodgers, if you can call it that. It's the second part of their lineup. And maybe their defense too, because Mookie Betts is going to play shortstop this year.
Yeah.
Mookie Betts is an amazing athlete, one of the best athletes in baseball. The shortstop results from him last year were middling. I trust that he'd be able to do a solid job there, but I don't think you can expect him to be like a top tier shortstop defensively. Um, you've got an outfield that uh, you got Teoscar Hernandez probably playing right field for you. He really is more suited to be a DH, but obviously with Shohei, he can't be the DH. Tommy Edman is going to be roaming center field. He was the NLCS MVP last year. He's a good little player, but I think he's more suited to be a middle infielder, and he's going to be playing center field. So, like, you can point at these things and see, like, well, they're not a perfect roster, but they're as close to perfect as any team in baseball. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%. They are the favorite to win the World Series. Um, and that's really all there is to it. They, like you said, they already won their first two games in the Tokyo series. I didn't stay up, but I did get up because my little puppy wakes me up, and I tuned into a little bit of it. Um, but yeah, so if you had to pick an X factor for the Los Angeles Dodgers' success this season, what would it be?
The success truly is like ironically the same as a lot of teams, but it's just, I mean, it has to be health, right? Like if they are able to stick their best guys out there consistently through a 162 game, like it's going to be the best team in the MLB. And at least record wise, we'll see when it comes to playoffs. Anything can happen, but if they are healthy and 80 to 90% of these players are healthy for the full season, that's their way to success. I mean, and I think they would still be competitive even with injuries, but it's like, if Shohei was to get hurt, I think it really dramatically changes the outlook of the team's season, right? Like any of those top, they as good as they are, they still do feel top heavy, like you said. Um, so yeah, I think health would be the X factor for success for the Dodgers.
Yeah, I think it feels like a little silly to pick an X factor for them because they are just so loaded. Um, but I think, yeah, like it's health, but maybe health with an asterisk. And that means like everyone can't get hurt, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like we've talked about health with other teams, like the Twins last week. If Correa or Buxton or Royce Lewis, who already is hurt, maybe,
Yeah.
goes down, like that changes the dynamic of that team entirely. With my Red Sox, if Garrett Crochet were to miss the bulk of the season, all of a sudden the outlook looks way different. For the Dodgers, it's really like, okay, Blake Snell gets hurt, it's not a big deal. Tyler Glasnow gets hurt, it's not a big deal. But you start stacking them, and maybe 5 or 6 guys get hurt, that then it becomes a big deal. But we saw even with guys getting hurt, they still won the World Series last year, and now they have more reinforcements. It's hard to say what an X factor is because I've never been so sure of a team's success. Now, I'm not saying guaranteed they're winning the World Series, but the Dodgers haven't missed the playoffs since I think 2012, and I just don't see them missing it this year either. It would take so much to go wrong for that to happen that I just, you know, so it's a cop out maybe, but like this
It
team,
is a cop out, but this team's a cop out, bro. Like, yeah,
yeah,
it's not a fair comparison when you're talking about the rest of the league and what these other teams kind of go through and deal with. And it's just like I'm looking at them, and it's just like there isn't anything like that. Yeah, the X factor is the Dodgers.
yeah. It's gonna be really cool. Like when it comes to the playoffs, the Dodgers are like I mean all season the Dodgers are gonna be the team to beat. It actually doesn't really matter where the records fall. I think the Dodgers are going to be everyone's big matchup. So, like, if a team does knock them out of the playoffs, that team is going to be heroes. That team is going to be celebrated.
100%.
So, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. I'm not going to bet against the Dodgers, but you never know. Baseball is a funny sport sometimes, and the best team doesn't always win. And so who knows what'll happen. But moving on to the next
I have a
thing. Oh,
question for
go.
you. Before we do, I have a
Yeah.
question for you. And this is a little bit dumb, but I'm curious because I had this conversation with a friend the other day.
Uh-huh.
Is there, would you consider yourself in like the y- Dodger hater, kind of part of the
Yeah,
fanship?
I'm a hater. I maybe wouldn't be as much of a hater if I didn't live in LA, but I
Sure.
see, look, this is like, this is a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
I don't like casual fans, but I don't like to say that too much because it's like the world needs casual fans. Not everyone can be a diehard fan. So like when someone's a casual fan who invests way less into their team than I do with my team, and then they try to talk smack to me, I'm like, no, come on.
Yeah.
You don't get to do this.
Yeah.
You have not put in the work to be able to do this. So in that sense, I've become a real Dodger hater. But yeah, that was your question. Do you have a follow up on that?
I do, because my second question was going to be like, is there teams that you would root for the Dodgers to beat?
The
Because like,
Yankees.
would you say that's it? Because I was
Yeah.
talking to this guy, and he's a Braves fan. He's from the South. He was saying he's like, this would be like the type of year where like I would almost even root for like if they were to somehow play the Astros in the World Series. He was like, I might root for the Astros.
I
Like,
would 100% root for the Astros. 100%.
yeah, and it's like, and the
Um,
Astros, for the last however many years, have been one of the most hated teams, booed wherever they go. Like,
yeah.
and yet it just feels like the Dodgers have created this like aura. And I don't know if it's the Dodgers per se or if it's like the fans. I feel
And
like the
it's
fans almost have more influence on that. But it's
the
just like,
fans for all sports, really. Like almost 100% of the time when I don't like a team, it's because of a bad interaction I've had with their fans or a
yeah,
fan or something. But at the same time, we don't like to see the same teams win all the time. So I think that's just unless it's your team, we don't like. I don't have anything in particular against University of Alabama, but I rooted against them every time they were in the national championship because that's what people do. The Dodgers are going to be that now, I think.
yeah,
It'll be tough if it's Yankees Dodgers again. Then I mean, I'll root for the Dodgers, but it's like, okay, this is Alabama versus Alabama at this point. Like
yeah. This feels
it,
bad both ways.
right. I didn't take much solace in last year's World Series, but um, yeah, I mean, it's the Dodgers. It's I don't fault them for getting better, but then you have to know that there's a target on your back now, and people are going to hate you. And if you're a Dodgers fan and you know that and you accept that, and you're like, I don't care, I have the best team. That's the way to be. But don't act like people should be rooting for the Dodgers. Like if it's Astros Dodgers World Series, don't expect people to be rooting for you. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
Astros are so far removed from that anyway. There's only Altuve is the only guy left from that team. Um, so it's a whole separate thing. But yeah, the Dodgers are the team to root against this year for baseball fans, and I can never root for the Yankees in any circumstance, really. But other than that, it's anyone but the Dodgers this year.
yeah,
And speaking of anyone but the Dodgers, the team that the Dodgers said that baseball said as a whole were the closest to knocking them out, the best team they played in the playoffs, got second place last year at the National League West. That's the San Diego Padres. They uh, won 93 games, not enough to win the division, but enough to make the playoffs. They won their wild card series against the Braves. They had the Dodgers uh, 2 games to 1 in the division series, and then just stopped scoring runs and couldn't win any more games after that. They lost Tanner Scott, as we said. Uh, they also lost Jurickson Profar after a career year last year, and Hassan Kim, their shortstop, who was injured for the playoffs anyway. But um, and then they didn't do much for most of the offseason and then had kind of a flurry of moves right towards the end. Um, they signed catcher Elias Diaz, who he finished the year on the Padres last year, right? They got also signed Nick Pivetta, starting pitcher. they got Jason Hayward to play left field, maybe platoon. I don't know.
That'd be
Connor Joe um, added to the mix, and then from the KBO, Kyle Hart, who spent some years struggling in the big leagues, went over to Korea, did pretty well, is now coming back. I believe it was Korea. It was either Korea
uh,
or Japan.
I believe it was Korea, and I believe he won the Korean Cy Young equivalent this past season.
Okay, yeah. So that happens every now and again. Eric Fetty the year before.
Mhm.
Uh, so we'll see. He was a Red Sox once upon a time. He was not good. The 2020 Red Sox, so we love to forget those that year altogether. But
You're forgetting one very notable addition to this team.
is it Gavin Sheets?
Is Gavin Sheets, who was just confirmed he's going to be making the opening day roster. I believe
Yeah.
he's going to be one of those guys who could be platooning in left field and old first base here and there. But don't be surprised when Gavin Sheets starts turning some heads.
Yeah, so if you take it at face value, it's not like the worst offseason ever. There was some
It
ownership.
felt like it though.
Right. There was some ownership power struggle going on. And then they lost out to the Dodgers on Roki Sasaki. Also, the Dodgers got so many more players than that. The Padres seemed, like I said, the closest team maybe to the Dodgers, like a team that could knock them out, team that almost knocked them out. Um, but then they didn't keep up with the Dodgers roster wise. So where do things stand for the Padres going into 2025?
Um, I think honestly, when it comes like take the Dodgers out of the picture of the NL, I think the Padres still stand fairly stable in where they position themselves. They're going to be one of the wild card teams. I think it would take a pretty down season or just some sort of injury problems to get them out of it. But I mean, we're getting back Luis Arias, who I could be wrong. Was he not the NL batting champ last year? Like,
He's won 3 straight batting champion or
yeah,
batting
and he
batting
he
average.
did that. Yeah, the batting. And he's a singles guy. I love it. And he did all that last year with a broken thumb. He had like multiple surgeries on it this offseason. He's going to be back and healthy. And, you look at guys like Tatis, and Tatis last year was coming off of an injury. And, he played the season injured and he had a little bit of stuff in the offseason. He's going to be coming back healthy. Same thing can be said for Machado. Same thing can be said for Xander. And so it's like we had a lot of guys who were playing, 80, 90% of what they usually are. If we get those guys back, I mean, Xander at his best is a great hitter and an average to above average middle infielder. Manny Machado, Tatis can both be MVP candidates. Some people, Juan Soto literally said he believes that Tatis is the best player in the league or the most complete player, I think he said. And it's just like, we have these pieces where it's like you can't count out the Padres. And as bad as this offseason felt, our team could be so much worse than it still is. Like we are still a good team and a good roster. Uh, so I think, going to the season, I think that like 90-ish wins range feels reasonable. I think we could still get there. Uh, and I mean, hey, every big dynasty needs that little brother team that kind of can steal a couple games from them here and there. So maybe that can just continue to be us, and who knows? In the playoffs, anything can happen. So
That's true. Yeah, I think the Padres. I think it's just not fair. Like the Dodgers are just not a fair team to compare any other team to. But the
yeah.
Padres get compared to them more than anyone else because they're division rivals.
Mhm.
They finished first and
Because they
second
have
last
to
year.
be.
Right. Um, but yeah, you take this this Padres roster versus the rest of baseball. It's up there among the best rosters. I don't love their pitching just because people are hurt right now, but
Yeah.
the top of the rotation is really good. Michael King and Dylan Cease are both very, very good.
Yeah.
I believe in Nick Pivetta. I think
I
the
believe in
Padres are a
Ruben
team.
Niebla. So I mean, if anyone can get someone right,
Yeah. Joe Musgrove's going to miss the year. That's a bummer. Yu Darvish is hurt right now. I don't know exactly what
Yeah,
the
it's kind of
outlook
up in
for
the
him
air.
is. And you got the last remaining knuckleballer right now, Matt Waldron. Loves knuckleballs, but he is currently injured as well. Um, but yeah, I think this is a good team, a team I expect to be competitive all year. I forgot to mention they got Jose Iglesias this offseason too, who's just like the all-time vibes guy. I mean, he was the engine that powered the Mets to the
Yep.
NLCS last year. Um, Tatis, I mean, I think he's my favorite player in baseball. I love watching him play. He can do everything so well. I love the power speed combo. He's still only 26 years old. He's had like a tumultuous career so far. But like this is his first year in a while where he's just coming in healthy with no baggage, just ready to play a full season. I like that.
Hmm.
Um, Jackson Merrill is he's gonna turn 22 this year. He had an amazing rookie year. We expect big things from him. And like you said, there was some injuries with some of these other guys that you expect more from. So it's not a bad team. I do get a little bit concerned about um, the ownership situation because it was
Yeah.
Pete Seidler. He was like, "Take shut up and take my money" approach,
He's
in the
like the
AJ
dream
Preller.
owner.
Right. And because he was like that, there are some contracts on their books that like don't if all of a sudden that's not going to be the vibe anymore, these contracts look really bad because they're going to hamstring you in terms of paying new players. So Dylan Cease and Michael King are both free agents after this season. Um, Ideally, you'd like to keep at
I
least one of
think
those guys.
I think we signed an extension with King, did we not? A small one?
I don't think you did, just like recently.
I could be super wrong. Maybe I dreamed it.
No, uh he's going to be a free agent after this season. So
Maybe we agreed on just a single year to avoid
you agreed
arbitration.
to. Yep, yeah, that's what happened. But
So I remember
anyway,
there's some contract thing that happened.
so there was like as good as the Padres were last year, there was trade talk surrounding those two guys because it's like if they're not going to spend money, how are they going to get better? Maybe the trade market. I mean, they traded Juan Soto a year ago, and it worked out pretty okay for them, as in terms of trading a star of that level. And
I
but
mean,
like
we
Xander
got both those
Bogaerts,
pitchers back.
yeah, basically, yeah. Bogarts is 32 and a half. He's got a lot of years and money left on that contract. He had his worst year at the plate last year. There was an injury. Hopefully he bounces back, but I don't know what you can I don't know if you can expect it to go up like beyond this. We're talking about 2025. So I'll try to leave my long-term concerns at the door, but for 2025, I think this is a perfectly good team. Definitely a team I expect to make the playoffs. They'll need a few things to break their way, more so than, of course, the Dodgers do. But it still should be a fun year for the Padres, and you got a lot of guys to like on this team. And AJ Preller in charge, like I expect them to make moves. If things aren't going well, he's going to make moves quick. I mean, Luis Ariz last year was like a May trade or something like that, pretty
Yep.
rare. But he's not afraid to give up a prospect. He's not afraid to get the guy he wants. So uh, if you
We've
had to
got
pick
two really high up prospects. I mean,
Mhm. If you had to pick the X factor for the 2025 Padres, what would it be?
um, I think it does again feel like a bit of a cop out, but I just feel like it's been so long since we've seen it. I think the X factor for this team is Manny Machado returning to what he's supposed to be. I have a great deal of faith in what Tatis is going to end up doing if he's healthy. But there's times when Machado goes through these like slumps where it feels like months between great stretches of play. And like the defense is usually always there, but we're talking about a guy that's almost routinely placed in the top three, four spots of the lineup, and he'll be batting like 190 with like two extra base hits and 14 double plays. Like, so yeah, I think Manny Machado getting back to what Manny Machado is supposed to be, and I don't know if that was health. I don't know if the vibes have just been off. I don't know, but something's been off with Machado, and I feel like it's almost been like because he'll have these really hot stretches, but the whole season just they felt like we've had like back to back almost disappointing seasons. And yet I don't think it looks like age was the issue. Like I know he's also, getting older, but it's like to me, I don't feel like age has been the issue. When you watch him, it just feels like there was something else there.
Yeah. Um, I really struggled to pick my X factor because the Padres were so good last year, but there was a few guys who didn't have great years. Which
No,
is you kind of talked about that.
yeah, it was this
And
crazy thing because like I feel like a lot of our kind of perimeter players played above the expectation, which helped offset our star players playing below expectation last year.
yep. Yeah. Yeah, so Machado, I'm looking at his numbers from last year. They ended up in an okay spot. They ended up basically in the 2023 spot. His defense got worse randomly, which is weird, but I don't expect that to be a big problem. Uh, but yeah, when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, which guy? Because like even Tatis hasn't played up to expectations yet, and injuries are part of that. Cronenworth has not been as good as he was a couple of years ago. He also has a pretty decent contract. But I'm going to go with Xander Bogaerts because when the Red Sox were really cooking, Xander Bogaerts was like our three hitter. He's like the shortstop. No one's challenging him for the shortstop job right now. And he's just been such a consistent hitter. He's not going to give you the big power numbers, but it's just like a solid every single year, gives you production. And last year he had a shoulder injury. He had to move to second for part of the year. Like just some funky things going on with him where it just didn't look like Xander. I mean, the WRC plus is I don't know what goes into the stat exactly, but it's a hitting stat where 100 is league average. And I know a lot of smart people use it, but it's weighted runs created plus. In 2018 to 2022, those are all with the Red Sox. It went 133, 141, 129, 129, 133. So he's like really consistent there. And then in the last 2 years with the Padres, granted, that Petco's a harder place to hit, but also this is a park adjusted stat, so it shouldn't matter. It dipped to 119 his first year in the pot with the Padres, and then last year was 95. So he went to below league average for the first time since 2017. It concerns me, but I have faith in him. And I think if he can get back to above league average as a bat and you add another, solid bat to the lineup, Padres should be able to run smoothly. So I think Xander Bogaerts, no pun intended, is going to be my X factor.
Yeah, no, 100%. I genuinely speaking, I think this season the Padres will go where honestly Manny and Xander take them. Like we have young, exciting players, but they have been the past 2 years, I would say, below what you'd want these guys to be as the high paying superstar kind of pillars of your team. Like, we're talking like what would the Dodgers look like if all of a sudden Freddie Freeman dropped from 300 batting average to like 260 and didn't really hit for power, and Mookie Betts all of a sudden dropped to like a 225, 230 hitter and didn't hit, like,
Yeah.
if you were to drop those guys, I mean, you're talking about such a different outlook, but they're just pillars of consistency. And we haven't got that from either of our guys who are supposed to be that.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, because it's like you said. I mean, in Boston, I don't know if there was a more like you could argue consistent offensive player than Xander. Like just he every year you kind of knew exactly what you're going to get, and it was always good. And even Manny Machado, like, it's
Yeah.
just these past 2 years have been a real struggle for both of them at the plate. And both of them had better years the year before, and then this year were even worse.
Mhm.
I, and so it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know, man.
I have faith in those guys. See, they're getting older. If we were talking about 2027, I maybe wouldn't feel the same, but we're talking about 2025, and I feel okay with those guys penciled into the lineup.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the team that got third place last year, the Arizona Diamondbacks. The year before, 2023, they went all the way to the World Series. Last year, they won 89 games, which is the same amount that the Mets and the Braves won. And just by some bad luck, they were the odd team out, so they did not get to compete in the playoffs. Um, and think about how differently we think about the Diamondbacks than we do the Mets. And they had the same record last year.
Yep.
The Diamondbacks were pretty good. They had the best offense in baseball by some metrics. And then they went out and they added Corbin Burns, who you could argue is the best starting pitcher in the free agent market. Seems like he wanted to play in Arizona. That's where he lives. So they got a deal done. Good for them. They did lose Christian Walker, their first baseman, and they lost Jock Peterson, their DH, but they traded for Josh Naylor from the Cleveland Guardians to play first base for them. They retained Randall Grichuk, who is a lefty masher. So, uh, where does that leave the Arizona Diamondbacks?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the curse of playing in the NL West, but I think if you were to take the Diamondbacks and fall them into any other division, you're talking about a team that's most likely competing for the division. And I would argue they're pretty clearly like the third team in this division still. I mean, I think the Padres lost some ground this year, but like, they're really good. Like, straight up, they're really good. They've got a lot of young talent. I mean, their outfield is, in my opinion, very exciting. Uh, Christian Walker, like, he was a great power hitter, and I think people don't really talk about Christian Walker as having one of the great, like, better first base seasons last year, but he really did. But I mean, Josh Naylor's no joke either. And so, I look at this team and I think the players they lost, I think, are replaceable. They added, like you said, Corbin Burns to kind of try and shore up this rotation, which I mean the rotation at their best is really good too. Uh, I think this is going to be another team that's going to be pushing into that high 80s again, like low 90s wins, and could very easily just be second place in the division, could very easily be a number one or number two wild card team. And I think this is a team you wouldn't want to see in playoffs. Like, it's just when you have an offense like this, they can mash the best pitcher. Like, really looking at this lineup, it's like they can kind of take it to you, whoever you are. And I think that could make them really dangerous in playoffs. And I really like this rotation. I'm looking at Corbin Burns, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, and then Brandon Fad. Like, that's really good. That's really, really good. And AJ Puck is no joke. They've got some decent guys in this bullpen, but this offense, I mean, I I think they easily could once again be potentially the number one offense in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Diamondbacks are one of the most underrated teams, and I think missing the playoffs is a big reason why
Mhm.
people don't talk about them the same way. But like, if things broke slightly differently and they made a run to the NLCS, I think we'd be talking about them the same way. Um, Corbin Carroll, he was Rookie of the Year in 2023, an amazing year. Started last year really slowly, and then the second half he was great again. Ketel Marte was like low key in the MVP conversation until he got
Uh-huh.
hurt last year. Uh, you add Josh Naylor to replace Christian Walker. I mean, that I don't know who's better overall, but like I don't think you're mad about having Josh Naylor on your team. And
No, they're
Eugenio
both great
Suarez
first basemen.
will hit some dingers. Jake McCarthy had a sneaky 3-WAR season last year. You've got one of the best young catchers in baseball, and Gabby Moreno. You already highlighted the rotation. I like it a lot better with Corbin Burns in there. And then, um, yeah, like even like the DH spot, you lose Jack Peterson, but with Pavin Smith and Randall Grichuk, that's a nice little platoon. You treat them as one guy, takes up 2 roster spots, but if you treat them as one player, basically, like you're not mad at that at all. So, um, yeah, I really like this lineup. I like the pitching a lot. The pitching, the guys that we've come to know and trust, not counting Corbin Burns, did not have great years last year. Zach Gallen, we had come to expect a little better from him than what we got last year. Merrill Kelly was, I think, injured a decent amount. Um, Jordan Montgomery, who he's like penciled in their bullpen right now. I mean, he was a disaster for them last year.
Yeah.
He might end up being traded at some point still. We'll see. But yeah, the bullpen sneaky really good. Like I like this team a lot. Um, so all that being said, we like the Diamondbacks, but if there's an X factor to put them over the top, who would it be for you?
Oof. I think if I was to look at this lineup here, I think for me the X factor low key would be I'm gonna go with Jake McCarthy because, like you said, he had a very sneaky good season last year, and yet I feel like he hasn't touched his potential yet. Like I feel like there's more to it, and he's got great contact. He's really fast, and he's last 3 years basically since he's become a full time player, averaging mid 20s on stolen bases. But I think that could go up, and it's just like the combination of him and Corbin Carroll together. They're just so good. They're so fast. They both have surprising amount of pop. I mean, Jake McCarthy didn't really hit a lot of home runs last year, but I think he has more pop than his numbers even show. I would pick Jake McCarthy, man. I feel like he's just poised to have a blow up season. I feel like he's been kind of pushing this wall, and I
Mhm.
believe he has the talent to just take one more big step, and we'd really see kind of a special player. I mean, Corbin Carroll's great too, but I think Corbin Carroll's his expectations I feel are higher.
Yeah,
Right. So for him to have a special season, you would not be as like, oh wow. It'd be like, well, that's kind of what we wanted. Jake
yeah.
McCarthy, I don't think people are. He's clearly in the shadow of Carroll, even though
Mhm.
arguably he's been as good. Uh, yeah, I think my pick is McCarthy, but little honorable mention is Eugenio Suarez as well. I do want to talk about him, and I'm sorry if you were. I don't know if he was going to be on there for you, but like one of the things I loved was I saw this thing talking about like the best power hitters over the last 5-6 years. People always just assume outright, oh, it's got to be Judge, it's got to be Giancarlo, it's got to be one of these guys, and it's like, you want to know who's at the top of the home run list? It's Eugenio Suarez. Like
Yeah.
he's like an automatic 30 home runs a year. Like, he's just very quietly like a top 5 power hitter in the league almost every year, and nobody talks about that. And the fact that they just very sneakily and quietly acquired him, and he's just their starting third baseman. Like
Yeah. It was a head
he
scratcher at
also,
the time but like from the Mariners' perspective, I didn't understand getting rid of him. But yeah, I mean, the guy hits his home runs, that's for sure. He doesn't do
yeah,
a ton of other things, but he's good vibes and he hits home runs, and can't complain about that.
those are two of the
Um,
best things in baseball.
that's true. I think if my X factor, I'm gonna go to the pitching side of things, and I'm gonna say Zach Gallen because he's in a contract year. We have seen him be an amazing pitcher. He started an All-Star game once. He just has had dominant years, dominant moments, and last year was kind of like it was good. Like you'd take that year for a lot of pitchers, but we'd come to expect more from Zach Gallen.
Yeah.
So let me look up his numbers from last year. So he trying to look at Fangraphs here. Where okay, ERA a 3.65 ERA. That's his highest since 2021. Um, his expected ERA was around 4. Like, it just it's not a bad year, but he didn't get Cy Young votes, and he's a guy you expect to get some kind of Cy Young support. If he can go back to being dominant Zach Gallen, and then you have Corbin Burns and Zach Gallen 1-2 punch, that's as good of a 1-2 punch as there is in baseball. And so, in a league where pitching matters so much, and we know this Diamondbacks team can hit because last year they did, and you know, they have a lot of the same guys. If those two guys can be aces, and then you get whatever solid contributions from the rest of the starting pitchers, that is one of the better teams in baseball. And so I would like to see Zach Gallen go back to his old form. I expect that. He's going to turn 30 this season. Like I said, contract year, sometimes that's a motivator for guys to just ball out. I would love to see him ball out. I expect Corbin Burns to ball out. And so I would love to see that at the top of the rotation. And that's, you run into a short series against any team, Dodgers included, and you got to face Corbin Burns and then Zach Gallen in games 1 and 2. You could be in a 2-0 hole real quick. So I like that. I hope that they can put it together. Like I said, we're not rooting for the Dodgers, so, take whatever we can get from the other teams here.
Yep.
And our next team up finished in 4th place last year. They used to be the Dodgers' #1 rival. It seems like that's not really the case anymore because they've been largely irrelevant since 2021. That's the San Francisco Giants.
Yep.
Last year, they finished 80 and 82. They got rid of their front office guy, Farhan Zaidi, and replaced him with Giants legend Buster Posey. So, Buster Posey, who was just playing a few years ago, I don't think he's even 40 years old yet. He's now running the show over there. And what did he do this offseason? Well, Blake's now left in free agency, which, I'm not going to blame him for that. But addition-wise, he made 2 free agent signings. That's a lot less than some teams, but they're 2 pretty notable ones. Justin Verlander signed a 1-year contract. He will be in the Hall of Fame someday. He's going to pitch this year at age 42. Didn't have a great year last year, but we saw him not too long ago winning Cy Youngs. And he said before he wants to pitch till he's 45. So he thinks he's still got stuff left in the tank. We'll see what that is. And then the bigger one is they gave a big contract to Willy Adames, the shortstop who was on the Brewers last few years, has been a great player for the last several years, signed with the Giants. So they finally got someone to take their money after failing, kind of like the Blue Jays a little bit, but maybe a little less public. For some reason, the vibe around baseball is San Francisco is a bad city. You don't want to play there. I couldn't disagree more. I love going to San Francisco. But I'll digress on that point. Where do you see the Giants going in 2025?
I mean, the NL West really is, in my opinion, filled with some heavy hitters. I would say the Giants are one of the worst teams in the NL West, and yet they would give a lot of other divisions some fits when it comes to just, being really, they're just a tough team. I feel like, I don't know. It's hard for me to predict out because they do feel like a team that's going to hover around 500 still. Maybe slip on the north side of that just with the additions and not a ton of detractions, honestly. But Yeah, I mean, I look at this team, Justin Verlander is getting older. His production is not what it once was, but at the same time, I saw the videos coming out of him in the bullpen sessions with, Hayden Birdsong and some of their younger pitchers, and he's giving them the notes, he's critiquing, he's letting them know, and it's like his impact actually might be felt a lot more in the pitching staff than it is from his days pitching. And you take that, I would argue they have the best defensive catcher in baseball.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
right? Like to me, it's not super, super close, but I would, you never want to be too sure. But he's really great. Patrick Bailey's a stud on the defensive
Mhm.
side, and they already play in such a defensive park. You have guys like Chapman. Willie Adames is no joke on defense, but that outfield is really solid. Like, if Jung Hoo Lee comes back too, like this is a good team. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, they could make some noise in the NL West too. And Jung Hoo Lee started on fire. Like he looks like he's the real deal. Um, both defensively and as their leadoff batter. Um, he made a lot more power than I think people expected, but just the speed, the contact, he really looks like he can be a really good leadoff hitter for them. I don't know. It's hard for me to project this team win loss wise because there's only so many wins you can have in this division, right? Like, simply put, the amount of games you play. But with all that being said, I still think that they're going to be good, and their defense is going to be a really high quality defense. Could even be a top defense this year.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I love their defense. Patrick Bailey, like you said, best defensive catcher in baseball. Matt Chapman, arguably the best defensive third baseman in baseball. Willie Adames can play shortstop. Uh, it wasn't mentioned as part of the offseason because it technically happened during the end of the season last year, but they did extend Matt Chapman for a long time, and I love that move for him. He had his best year since his Oakland days last year. Um, yeah, I like this team, but like you said, I would like them a lot more if they were in another division. You've got to play the Dodgers, the Padres, the Diamondbacks each 14 times. That is not that's not gonna. I mean, if they can somehow have good records against all three of those teams, then they should be in the playoffs. But that's easier said than done. If they were in the Central, like, you know, they could compete for the division title, but I don't really see that happening in this division. That being said, I like the team. I don't love the team. There's just too many question marks in this lineup. And I don't mean question marks like we have no idea what they'll be, but just there's not a lot of guys you can just pencil into certain statistical benchmarks. So, like, they haven't had a 30 home run season since Barry Bonds, which seems crazy because Barry Bonds hasn't played in 18 years. But it's a hard home ballpark to hit home runs in. But still, like, someone's got to do it at some point, right? Um, Matt Chapman had a great year last year. I expect big things from him. Heliot Ramos was an all star last year, had a great year, but he's like had crazy split. Like he destroyed lefties, but then didn't really do much against righties. Um, but like, yeah, Jung Hoo Lee, like I like him. You don't know what you're gonna get from him. He hasn't really played too much big league baseball. He has maybe the greatest nickname in the game right now, grandson of the wind. I mean, that's just outstanding. I like Willie Adames a lot. He hit for a lot of power in Milwaukee, and it's going to be harder for him to do that in San Francisco. That doesn't make him an unvaluable player, but it just like you can't pencil in the same numbers.
Yeah.
Um, so, and Tyler Fitzgerald, he had an amazing year last year. Is that who he's going to be, or is he going to come back down to earth a little bit? It's just too many question marks for me to really, really love this team. Um, the pitching staff excites me, but it doesn't it's kind of the same as the offense. Like, are you going to get good Justin Verlander? Are you going to get good Robbie Ray? Um, you've got these young guys,
Same
Hayden
for Jordan
Birdsong.
Hicks.
Yeah, Jordan Hicks. Like, I mean, should he even be a
He's
starting pitcher? Like,
he's one of the most volatile stat line
yeah,
pitchers I've ever seen.
yeah. Um, and then you got Kyle Harrison, who might start the year in the minors, but like, I expect innings from him. Like, this is a team that if everything goes perfectly, will be one of the best teams in baseball, but it's just too hard for everything to go perfectly in any given year that I expect them to be around 500, maybe a little better.
Yeah.
But they're my dad's favorite team. They're my brother's favorite team. So I always root a little bit for the Giants. What do you see for them as the X factor?
I'm kind of torn between two. I think one of the most obvious ones, like Jung-Hoo Lee, was one of their big name acquisitions. Just a season ago, and he did start off really good, and then instantly got hurt. And it's like, what would this team look like if they had a guy like that at the top of the lineup? But I talked about him a lot. I think my X factor is actually going to be Camilo Doval. Uh,
Or
this dude was lights out for 3 straight years and then had a tough one last year. Uh, he still had a decent amount of saves, but when you look at his numbers from the previous 2 seasons, I mean, a 2.5, a 2.9, like really good stuff, low-ish whip, but then everything just skyrocketed last year. And I think that was kind of the name of the game for the Giants last year, was they'd have these really good games and their bullpen kind of fell apart last year, uh, which is uncharacteristic of the Giants, I would say. Uh, so I'm going to go with Camilo Doval. I mean, anytime you have a guy, well, is this true? They have someone else listed as their closer.
yeah, Doval will not be their closer. It'll be Ryan Walker, who he's just one of those relievers that it's like, who is this guy? And then you look up his numbers and it's like, oh, he's he's a guy. So yeah, Ryan Walker's gonna close, which I think bodes well for Doval. I think if he's in a less pressure filled spot, um
Yeah, I mean, maybe
then
that'll do numbers for him. Maybe that'll be good, but I did not realize that they basically replaced him.
yeah, he got even sent to the minors last year. Doval did for part of the year. But yeah, this guy Ryan Walker, he had a 1.91 ERA last year, 11.1 strikeouts per nine, uh, only 2 walks per nine. So he's going to be the guy going into the year. But I think, yeah, you can like expand your X factor to just the bullpen.
The bullpen.
You know,
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, they just need to be able to close games. I didn't realize the ball was getting moved like that, but hey, that still is the X factors. You need to be able to close your games out. This is not going to be a super high scoring team. So with that, if you get the type of performance from your starters, you can't come in and be giving up 3-4 runs in the last 2 or 3 innings. Like, that's just not a recipe for winning in San Francisco.
yeah, yeah. I don't think that's a bad take there. I think my X factor, I kind of am waffling between two guys, and they really have a lot in common. So that would be Jung Hoo Lee and Patrick Bailey. And what they have in common is that they should be great defenders. I mean, we've seen Patrick Bailey see, like we already talked about, he's the best defensive catcher in all of baseball.
Come here.
And then uh, he just doesn't hit at all. So, like, if he could hit, if he could even be a league average hitter, I mean, that makes him such a more valuable player to this team because right now it's like when they used to have pitchers bat, in the National League.
Yeah.
It's like they're valuable, but they're going to be an out in the lineup. Jung-Hoo Lee, I think, is really going to be my choice for X Factor. I just like to sneak Patrick Bailey in there because Jung-Hoo Lee, the floor and the ceiling are so far apart because we just don't know. Um, and if he hits his ceiling, then the Giants struck gold, and he's going to be, one of the most exciting players in baseball. He's got the tools that are fun to watch and everything. He seems like a fun guy to have around in the clubhouse and everything. So I'm hoping for the best for him. I hope a full healthy season, uh, and it just pays off, and he can hit for a little power, and he can use his speed, and he can use his defense, and I think he has a really good throwing arm and everything. So if he can have a great year, the lineup looks so much better to me. But if he starts the season slow and has to move down to like the bottom third of the lineup, like then what is the top of the lineup going to look like? And I think that really opens the door for a lot of negativity. So he's going to be my X factor for the Giants this year.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking at his profile right here. He's way bigger than I thought he is. Because like I watched my fair share of games early on. He looks small, and
Yeah, he
yet
kind of looks like a small guy out there.
yeah, dude, he's 6'1", almost 200. Like this is not a small dude.
Yeah, dude, athletes, it's always so deceiving.
It's crazy.
Yeah, now look at him. I'm gonna pull up his. I wonder if he qualified for Statcast last year. Because let's see his. So he didn't qualify for anything technically, but he was in the 97th percentile for arm strength, um, and the 79th percentile for sprint speed. He was. Um, those are actually two things he technically qualified for because I think they only take like the max or something like that. But
Yeah.
uh, the batting numbers look kind of good statcast wise. It just again, it wasn't a big enough sample for them to technically count it, but
Yeah.
uh, he got good contact a lot of the times. He didn't whiff very much. He didn't strike out very much. So if he can improve the plate discipline to add some walks to his game, and he could be a good little player, and I hope he is.
He could be a good big player.
That's true.
That's a boy.
All right. We have one more team in this division, and after all this talk about these teams that could be good, we come to one that unfortunately just really doesn't have a chance to be good, and that's the Colorado Rockies. They spent the offseason not doing much. They signed Tyro Estrada, who's going to be their starting second baseman. They signed Kyle Farmer, who's going to be, backup all-purpose infielder type guy. They got rid of Brendan Rodgers, which is not really that big of a deal because Tyro Estrada is going to come in and try to do the same thing but better. And that's really it. They finished last year uh, with 101 losses. That's back-to-back 100-loss seasons for them. They still just have Bud Black running the show over there as the manager. He's one of the longest tenured managers at this point. The Rockies have not been good in like 7 years or something like that. So, um, yeah. What are the thoughts on the Rockies, if there's any?
The thoughts are this. The Rockies are really lucky that the Chicago White Sox have existed. That's the only thing I can say about them is they're really, really lucky that the White Sox have existed because, like, truly, this is a team. Like, if you were to take the vibe, the mentality, the talent, all the things, and put this in any other sport, like, it's a last place team everywhere. Like, it's not good. They fit in they're in a park that the way they build their team is basically just a disadvantage for them. It's it's really bizarre. I mean, it's a team that feels like Denver is such a cool sports city. They have good fans. Like they have one of the coolest parks in all of baseball, and yet they just refuse to be anything. Like they it sucked because there were years where they were really good, right? Like they had Nolan Arenado back in the prime of Charlie Blackmon, DJ LeMahieu. They, had young Trevor Story. Like there was a moment in time, and I remember it vividly because I used to be one of these poor Colorado Rockies fans before they did my boy Nolan dirty. But like there was a moment in time where they actually had the opportunity to be extremely good. Like because that park is built around the home run ball, obviously. But what they had was a dominant interior defense where it's like in Colorado, teams are going to hit the ball. There's going to be home runs, but they weren't giving up the small ball. Like that defensive like front of Nolan, Trevor Story, DJ LeMahieu was maybe for the time probably the best defensive little
Infield,
infield,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like I
they were
wasn't
great.
as I wasn't as involved in MLB when I was following the Rockies, but I would be shocked if there was like really a better, like clearly better infield than
Yeah,
what the
I
Rockies were putting out.
defensively, yeah, I don't think so. Yeah,
Yeah, and I even remember I forget the guy's last name, but his first name was Mark. He used to hit like 20, 30
Mark,
home runs a
Mark
season.
Reynolds, yeah.
Mark Reynolds, that was my guy. And it's just like, and it's like every single one of those players was hitting 20, 30, and sometimes Nolan would top out and get close to 40. Like,
Yeah.
and they were hitters who were, it was power and defense. Like, that's what that team was. The pitchers just needed to eat innings and get through it, and they had an opportunity. And they've just fumbled it. And I don't get this loyalty to Bud Black. I don't know what he's done other than take a great team and slowly chip away at it. Um, they've committed money to guys who I think don't move the needle even a little bit. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's a really weird thing, and I'm looking back. Kyle Freeland is one of their top. I argue one or two pitchers, and I'm looking back at the beginning of his career, 2018, which is like prime time. Nolan, Trevor, DJ, Charlie Blackmon, like that. 2018 is probably like the pinnacle of me as a Colorado Rockies fan. This dude had 200 innings and a 2.85 ERA.
yeah, fourth place Cy Young that year, which is
Yeah,
for a Rockies pitcher. I mean, that's crazy.
insane. The fact that he got 200 innings, the fact that he has a sub 3 ERA, pitching half his games in Colorado, and it was built off of this mentality, like we talked about, of you play good defense, you have a guy who can eat innings, and then you just rake. That's the recipe for success in Colorado, and they refuse. They absolutely refuse. And it's really weird to me. Like they try and go with these, like really hard throwing dudes who are supposed to be strikeout guys, but any contact in Colorado ends up flying way further. So, guys like Herman Marquez, I feel like would actually be solid in other places, and yet here it just isn't. It doesn't work. Yet they gave him money, and yet they refused to give money to guys like Nolan back in the day, and they let DJ
Well, no,
LeMahieu.
they gave Nolan money, and then they just traded him anyways. That's why
Well,
the
they traded
Cardinals
him
can't trade
to
him right
get.
now.
Yeah, they gave him money, but they traded him for money. To my knowledge, I could be wrong, but
Yeah,
I don't think they got anything back. They traded Nolan for cash.
they traded Nolan. I'm gonna just step in here and carry
Please
on.
do.
The Rockies are one of the worst run franchises in all of sports. There is a tier in baseball of the worst teams, and the Rockies are squarely in that with, in my opinion, the Marlins and the White Sox. But uh, they just everything they do, it just doesn't make sense. The decisions don't make sense. So they extended Nolan Arenado, who said he wanted to stay there, and then like it was a year or two later, they traded him, and it was like, okay, you traded him for the payroll like release, but you still paid down some of his contract. They are still paying Nolan Arenado some amount of money. Um, and then yeah, the return was pretty minimal, and what did they use that money for? They gave Chris Bryant the bag. And Chris Bryant has been checked out ever since he got that contract. They they didn't capitalize, like you said, on their like homegrown group of stars, and now they're kind of trying to get there again. And I just don't have any faith that they'll capitalize because they do have some exciting players. Brenton Doyle in center field is one of the best defenders in the game in center field, which is exactly what you need in Colorado. The good infielders are nice, but that outfield is so big, you really need good defensive outfielders. Um, they have Ezekiel Tovar at shortstop, who, if shortstop wasn't such a stacked position in baseball, we'd be talking about a lot more. He had a great year last year. Uh, I'm pretty sure he got one of those like pre-debut extensions, so they have him for like the next 8 years or something like that. Um, they have one of the top pitching prospects in the game in Chase Dollander. The problem is nobody can pitch in Colorado. It just doesn't happen. And it's like, yeah, the ball flies, but also there's something weird with like the spin and stuff, like a visiting pitcher struggling. So I don't know what will ever be done about that. But the Rockies ownership and management doesn't care because they don't hire these top minds in baseball. They just trust themselves. So they're not getting smarter and they're not getting better and they don't have anyone working on these problems. And so it's like, yeah, you have some exciting guys, but I don't trust that you'll develop them and I don't trust that they'll succeed for you or that even if they succeed individually, that the team will be successful. And that, like the owner has said, like, well, people still go to the games because summertime is nice in Denver and it's fun to go to a ball game, drink some beer, and it doesn't really matter if the team's good or bad when you're there. I mean, if you're a diehard, it certainly does, but like, it's just such a bummer because they have a cool aesthetic. It's fun to watch games at Coors, even on TV, because like we said, the ball flies and everything. But they're just directionless, and I just don't have any faith that they'll get better anytime soon. And they're in like arguably the most stacked division in baseball. So like this is all just a recipe for them to be absolutely terrible again this year. I would not be surprised at all if it's a third straight 100 loss season, um, which should be unacceptable for any team. Um, but are they going to fire Bud Black if that happens? I don't know. Are they going to hire new analytics people? I don't know. Like, I just have no faith in them whatsoever.
Their closer has back-to-back 6 ERA seasons. 6.
Yeah.
Six.
For those who are new to baseball, 6 is too many runs to be giving up.
Plus too many runs. It. I mean, like it's almost guaranteed he's going to give one up.
Yeah.
You're basically walking him out there being like, well, hopefully we've got 2-run lead because he's going to give one up, which is bonkers that this is their closer.
Yeah.
This team just leaves such a bad taste in my mouth. They disgust me.
Yeah. And man,
I wish they would.
they were the only team that really incorporated purple. Like, there's things that like you want this team to be good.
It is one of the teams that it's so easy to root for this team, even as like a not Rockies fan, and they refuse to capitalize on any of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, that being said, what do you what direction are you looking at for X Factor?
X Factor for me, there's not really a lot. If I had to pick one, I remember the transition post Nolan was that they had this big power hitting, lefty third baseman prospect who was going to be really good, and his name was Ryan McMahon. And he's been so like aggravatingly average. And So I think when I look at that, it's like he was touted to be this like big power hitting lefty third baseman. And I look at the power numbers and I'm like, you play in Coors, and yet I'm seeing your most home runs in a season is 24. You pretty much are barely touching 20 every year. Your most RBIs in a season is 86. And granted, RBIs is kind of more of a team stat than home runs. But like, there's just such a lack of what he was supposed to be. His highest batting average is only 254. There's just a lot of things here that feel like he never panned out to what he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And yet, when you look at him, you still see a dude who I think has a really pretty lefty swing, plays in a field that could get him a few more home runs. He's he's 30. And I'm going to say he's only 30 because that means he's not yet past the point of no return.
It feels like he's been around forever. And yeah, the fact that he's only 30 right now.
Yeah, I mean, because he flew up. He flew up the minors. And he was
He's their second longest. He has the second most major league experience of anyone in their lineup, behind only Chris Bryant. So
yeah. Yeah. And so I think if I was to try and pinpoint one, I would say it's Ryan McMahon. I feel like, you pointed out the two young kind of rising stars they have with Tovar and Doyle. Nolan Jones was another guy who was highly, thought of coming out and just kind of has been disappointing. But I think Ryan McMahon could be an X factor for this team. Like if they were to really get a guy who can hit 30 plus, maybe get close. I think he's got the tools to hit 40 home runs. But I don't know. It's hard to even call it an X factor at this point. It's just like I would just love to see him have any bit of the potential he showed.
Yeah. The thing that's frustrating about Ryan McMahon also is like it's another example of the Rockies being directionless. Like he's put together decent seasons, and like there have been multiple trade deadlines where it's like, hey, the Rockies could get a couple nice pieces if they traded Ryan McMahon, and they just keep not doing it because they're like, well, we want him to be part of the team when we're going to be good. And it's like, are you so delusional that you think all of a sudden your team's going to magically be good in the time that Ryan McMahon is under contract? Like, I don't know what his contract is right now, but there were time. I think he signed some kind of extension at some point. So like varying amounts. If you could trade him and start this rebuild at any of those points, like it's just so like as a Rockies fan, it's like pick a direction because we're obviously bad.
Yeah.
We're losing 100 games multiple years in a row. But if you know what the like smart bad teams do is they trade their contributing players to kickstart a rebuild. So my X factor is like it's hard to do X factors for these bad teams because there's just no chance they're going to make the playoffs. There is no chance. So
yeah.
For me, it's like I don't know if it needs to be the owner selling the team or if it needs to be overhaul of management. Like they just need to get smarter. They need to have a direction. They need to make decisions that make sense for the Colorado Rockies and not for someone who's just content to make money off of owning a baseball team. Unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon. But I would like to see some positive because like I expect some positive development on the field. Like even if it doesn't result in wins, like I said, there are players here that I like. I just want to see a direction that I like as a franchise. So they're not going to go anywhere, especially in this division. They might lose 100 games again, but I just want to see some level of improvement.
So if you are the Colorado Rockies then, because they don't have an X factor, what's the moves you're making? What would you do to set this team on the right path if you were given the controls?
If I was given the controls, I would start by hiring smart people. So like I don't know exactly like the ins and outs of this game the way the analytics people do, but like there's some something, and I don't even know how to Google this necessarily, but like the Rockies are the only team that doesn't have like an internal data system or something like that. Like
Yeah,
so, it like
they
they're
don't have
just
their own like analytics team.
right. They're just archaic in so many ways. Like I don't know what it would be roster wise. Like I don't know like trade this guy for that piece. Like I don't know that. But I trust there are people that do know that could help them. And I think they need to get those people in the building. Hire someone from the Rays, or the Brewers or the Guardians, like these teams that don't spend money and still end up being successful. Get someone in there who's interested in making the Rockies the best version of the Rockies and start an overhaul. And
Yeah,
it'll take a while because it does. And that's just the way it goes. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's a bummer for Rockies fans. I don't personally, I don't think I know any Rockies fans, but I'm sure there's a lot of Broncos fans out there who are Rockies fans. So there's
yeah, I'm
like,
sure they're not very public.
yeah. Okay, so let's just close this out by giving our predictions for the final standings of 2025 for the National League West. Matt, you can go ahead first.
Cool. So, we always go in chronological order, or not chronological, but like in order of the previous
What?
year's rankings.
Uh,
Um, I don't think the rankings changed this year. I it feels pretty cemented that the only switch I could see would be Diamondbacks Padres. Um, but I still think that the Padres, if they're doing what they need to, are still the second best team in this division. Um, I think we're going to see Dodgers take the division. And like I said, I think that they really could compete for the like all-time wins record. I think the Padres are going to be kind of exactly where they were. Could be a small dip, give or take a few games here or there, but I think they're going to be in the low 90s. Diamondbacks, same thing. I think they're going to be high 80s, low 90s. Giants will hover around just north of 500 rather than just south of 500. And I think the Rockies are going to be the second worst team in all of baseball, maybe the worst team in all of baseball. They're going to be competing with the White Sox for that title. So
don't discount the Marlins, man. I think the Marlins are going to be real bad.
I think the Marlins are going to be real bad, and yet I just don't believe that they could be as bad.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's a fair point. I think I am going to do the one thing that you could see someone doing, which is I'm going to flip the Diamondbacks with the Padres,
Yeah.
just because, like, there's something to be said for the vibes of the Padres offseason being as bad as they were. I don't know if that's necessarily fair because they kept most of their players and they were a good team last year. I expect the Padres to be in the playoffs, or at least in the hunt for the playoffs. But I just think the Diamondbacks, like, I think I don't know if you can call it sneaky when a team was in the World Series 2 years ago, but I was like surprised by how good they were last year and didn't make the playoffs. And I think they got better with Corbin Burns. So I think the Diamondbacks leapfrog the Padres. I think they'll be close. Dodgers could be one of the best teams ever, like you said. Giants will be pretty mid, and the Rockies will be terrible. So, um, yeah. So we're pretty similar there. Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the National League West. We have one more division to go. It's the American League West. We'll do that next week. We'll also go through um, next week. We'll be recording either on opening day or the day after or the day before opening day. We'll see. Um, we'll make our playoff predictions for which teams are making the playoffs because we've told you the standings, but we haven't always said the wild cards and this and that. So we'll go over that next week. Let's finish this episode off with our classic. What am it called?
Very exciting. It's dingers and stingers.
Dingers and Singers. Yes. What are they? I'm blanking on the word. Segment. Segment. That's what it is. Um.
Small interjection though, very exciting is going to be. I'm looking at the Padres schedule. I believe their last 3 games of the year is a 3-game series against the Diamondbacks, which honestly could decide the placement. Like
Yep.
I really think it could come down to the last 3 games of the year for those teams.
It absolutely could. It
Yeah,
absolutely
so
could.
that's actually very fun.
All right.
Oh, we got a lot of get good series before that because we play the Rockies and then a series and then we play the Rockies and then a series and then we play the White Sox and then a series and then we play the Diamondbacks. So late season, I'm calling it now. Padres are going to come up from the pits and make their little late season run.
There you go. You heard it here first. Let's just do our dingers and stingers very briefly. We'll start with the stinger because we had the same one, and kind of was a sports story that went beyond sports this week. The Department of Defense website removed their article about Jackie Robinson and his military service in a purge of all things diversity, DEI, what have you. Um, I'm not going to get into the politics of all that because that's not what this show is. Safe to say it's annoying. But yeah, I mean, there is absolutely no reason why Jackie Robinson, a true American hero by every sense of the word, broke the color barrier in
For all of
professional
sports.
sports. Yeah. And was served our country in the military in wartime. Like, uh, it just seems silly that they did that in the first place. They have put it back. So again, I'm not going to get into the politics of all that, but it's just that if we want to keep politics out of sports, then or like that's what people say often, then let's keep it out of sports altogether. Like, don't
Yeah.
take down some Jackie Robinson history for people to find and learn. And who's going to be looking at that website? It's not like random people searching this stuff. It's going to be kids doing school projects and stuff like that. And so the more information about Jackie Robinson out there, the better, especially in matters of him being just an absolute hero. So good that it's back, bad that it was removed in the first place. We agree. That is our stinger. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just disappointing to see stuff like that happen. And like you said, the big comment people love to make is keep politics out of sports. And yet it seems like there's certain political things people love to use, and then something like this happens, and it's just a clear show of like where things kind of stand at the moment. And yes, they put it back, and yet they still did it to start with, right? An honest mistake can still be something bad. Um, but we don't need to go too far into it. It's disappointing, I think is the word, that it even had to be a conversation because, like you said, it's Jackie Robinson, like universally respected as being just like an outstanding person and someone who legitimately changed culture and American sports for the better.
Uh,
And so just to see him kind of be disrespected like that off of something so arbitrary feels, like, it's just a bummer.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
bummer.
So in brighter news, for me anyway, my dinger for the week. This is, I'm going beyond baseball, I'm going beyond football. My favorite basketball team, the Boston Celtics, they won the championship last year, and then in kind of a stunning move, the majority ownership went up for sale, and it was kind of worrisome. You don't like that. They had good owners who obviously put the team in a good direction, but today it was announced who is going to be buying the majority share, and it is Bill Chisholm, who I had never heard of before, which most rich
Father
people
of
don't.
jazz.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a relation there. But this is a rich guy somewhere, works in finance, doing something. But he is from Boston and grew up a Celtics fan, and so that gives me a lot of hope because that's what I think sports owners should be. They shouldn't just be rich people who want a a chance to uh, like make a team their little plaything. the best thing that can happen to a sports franchise is a fan of that team buys them and then just tries to turn them into a juggernaut. It's what Steve Cohen is doing with the New York Mets, and I hope it continues with the Celtics. I'm not too worried about the direction of the Celtics one way or another because they've been good for a while now. But I like to see that. It's like if I was randomly a billionaire, what would I want to do? Well, I'd want to buy one of my favorite sports teams and try to make them as good as possible. So it's kind of
Yeah,
fun.
no, I think underrated part of being a sports fan is having a good owner. People never really think, when they're talking about what team they're going to be a fan of or whatnot. Like, you never really think about ownership when you're young, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, dude, it impacts the team like so deeply. And I think about, growing up a Rams fan, when we finally got sold to Stan Kroenke, my world changed. My whole world changed. So I absolutely am very excited for you. Not the biggest Celtics fan personally, but for you, I'm excited. It's a good feeling having an owner you love. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, so that's exciting.
Do you have a highlight from your week at the Dinger, if you will?
In the notes, right? We have this stuff. We have our dinger. We have our stinger. This week, I kind of had to write in a little ST in front of the D, so it's a distinger. Not a great sports week for old Matty here. My distinger for the week is I've been reading some reports, and I think a lot of teams try and be cautious with the reports they put out, and especially when it comes to injuries, and so close to the season starting, they don't want to give away too much. But Darvish is experiencing some elbow inflammation that is being attributed to 1,000 different things because I don't think anyone has the straight. But there's rumors floating out there, and there's some smaller reports that are out that it could be one of those days where his elbow might be cooked. He struggled at the end of last season to stay healthy. He took off all that personal time, and there was a lot of reports that had to do with his own health. And then for him to come back and really not be doing a ton, and then see this happen to him again, and now it's like he's gonna be out to start the season. It's just, it sucks. I love Darvish. He's one of my favorite players in MLB. Uh, yeah, I would be pretty heartbroken if just another piece of this Padres offseason was that Darvish kind of had that physical wall hit him. He's not a young guy. So,
Yeah.
it's one of those things you can't expect him to be perfectly healthy forever, but it's just, you never like to see it. And there are reports that he is just kind of reaching that point where maybe his body is retiring the guy, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of
it's a
there's a lot
bummer.
of players that happens to.
Hopefully it ends up being not much of anything.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
But he is 38. He had Tommy John about 10 years ago, once already. I think indisputably the best Japanese pitcher that's come to the major leagues. And there's been some good ones. So, best wishes to you, Darvish. We'll see how that plays out in the coming weeks, plural. We'll see. But that's our episode. We miss Dallas so much. He'll be back.
Yeah, sweet boy.
He's coming back in like a day. So he'll be back for our next record.
Fantastic for his home division.
Yep. Yeah. We know he loves talking Angels baseball. We also we'll talk about the other teams over there. And have a good week, everyone. We'll see you later.
Toodaloo.